There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioner's future. This is just one of them. Hey, how are we doing? It is Wednesday evening and we are dialing in to another future of work. How you doing? How's things been? Show 15, can you believe that? 15 weeks we've been having this fun. Well, I've been having this fun. I hope you've been having fun too. So what are we doing this week? This week we're doing teamwork again, but in particular we're doing how the role of teams has changed, and not just in a post-pandemic world. But before we get there, you know, we've got some things that we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is we need to thank our sponsors, who are Treble 3, who as always are doing some amazing work when it comes to the world of digital print, not just the physical stuff. They do the online stuff too. Here from their Facebook page is some of their recent work. I'm just having some button presses. So fabulous signage for CM Motors. I just want to say, Treble 3 guys, you missed a bit of an opportunity. The guard dog sign could do with a bit of work, right? So next time you go and see them, there's an upsell opportunity for you that you can have that one for free. That's all from me. Treble 3 are lovely. Beyond the guard dog signs, they do fantastic things. You know, they did all the stuff for the Rise of the Humans, and they do the stuff for the Envisioners. Give them a shout, treble3.co.uk for all your digital print needs. What else are we talking about? We're talking about the Dialing into the Future of Work live stream we did a couple of weeks ago with Hoggett Bowers. I've just spent most of the weekend actually slicing up the little, you know, the little sound bites you get in all of these conversations, which is about those absolutely crisp moments of sort of clarity from, we had a CEO, a CFO, and an NED and chair talking about their perspective on how they're managing their FTSE 100, 250 companies through lockdown. Really a great opportunity to have that insight. So take a look at the live stream, and also those clips. I'll be sending those out because I'm up on this whole digital marketing game. I know what I'm doing, give or take the odd mute button fiasco, but we've moved on from there. So without any further ado, let's look at teamwork. Now, there's two things I need you to know about teamwork. The first is never ever go on to those corporate sort of stock art websites or video websites and type in the words teamwork and success, or at least if you do that, make sure you have access to a paper bag or some kind of bucket, because there is, I mean, what were these guys even thinking about with this? But actually it does a great job of bringing me to my second point about teamwork. Is teamwork's bloody hard, right? And getting it right is bloody hard. And if I think about all of the teams that I've been in over the years, I know I've been in great teams. I know I've been a pain in the arse in some of the teams being in, thinking of no names. And I've worked in those teams where actually things have just been amazing. Some of the best teams that have been, and I'm thinking about actually you, Peter Maxmin, and you, Alex Payne, and a team that you curated where you brought in a whole bunch of disparate people and you celebrated the special skills that we each brought. And it was the first time actually that I've really witnessed great curators of teamwork, people who are there like trying to bring these different skills together in a way that they were recognized, celebrated, and brought together to deliver amazing results. And with that in mind, I'd like to flip us to this conversation, which is this fabulous book by Caspar Craven. And you can imagine actually what caught my eye was the title, so Be More Human. But it is a book about teamwork and leadership. And let's bring Caspar in. We're delighted to have Caspar with us. How are you doing, Caspar?
I'm fantastic, Dave. Good to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for writing a book that basically hasn't just made my day, but had me sort of shouting out loud at several points. And before we get there, I mean, the thing I particularly loved about the book was it really recognises a need to change the way we think about teams and teamwork, and not just perspective of managing them, but being part of a team and all that stuff. So what I'd love you to do, could you just sort of give us a brief overview? It'd be great to introduce yourself, but also just talk a bit about what you were trying to achieve through the book.
Yeah, no, of course. It's interesting. I'm going to pick up on the first point that you made about teamwork and trying to find those stock images on the internet, because when we were looking for a book title for this, we went and did all those sort of things, and we came up with these terrible images of, you know, rings of people, or people mountain climbing or holding hands or in rockets and all those sorts of things. You know, the sort of stuff I'm talking about, right? And actually what we ended up coming up with was the thumbprint. And, you know, the core essence of the book is remembering that it's humans who sit at the heart of teams. And I guess the book basically, it's a set of 20 principles, or the other way of putting it is it's 20 mistakes that I've made in my life, and I've learned the hard way about what it takes to build brilliant teams. And I was came into the working world in the 90s, and the way that I was taught to build teams and interact with people and manage and lead, which are all interchangeable terms, I guess, to some extent, that came spectacularly unstuck for me at the age of 37. So I had to really rethink what it takes to build amazing teams. And so basically, that's what the book is trying to share. It's those hard-won principles. And the fundamental thing comes down to it is that it's just humans who sit at the heart of teams, and people only do things for their reasons, not for your reasons. So it's a really deep understanding of what drives people that enables us to build amazing teams.
Yeah, thanks, Caspar. And I love that. And one of the things that really attracted me to the book as I was reading it was the level of humility that was there. Because, guys, you all know this, right? We've all read the bloody leadership books and the teamwork books and all that. And it's all about performance and get more from your team. And it all just feels a bit Victorian. And most of you will know why I'm saying that. But we've all been inside those teams. And it won't be a surprise to you, Caspar, to know that most of my mates, we're all freaks. We're all the sort of the last people in the world you'd want on a team, because we're hard work, right? Because we think a little bit differently and we behave a little bit differently. But actually, there's some magic, if you can tolerate some of those behaviors, if you can harness them. And what I loved about the book is the book really starts to talk about that human level of engaging people and giving them a sense of how their contribution matters, not to the performance of the company or to the numbers, but really to the achievement of the goal of the team. And it's probably with numbers that I wanted to start, because that's kind of where you start in the book. And at the opening of the book, you paint this sort of picture of in a sense, old world, new world. And you don't use those words, but the old world is the world that many of us are familiar with. It's a world of metrics and numbers and targets. And, I'll tell you now, in my experience, in a certain period at Microsoft, I'm not saying it's true now, you could have come up, you could have fixed the whole alchemy problem, come up with a way to transmute base metal into gold. But if it didn't connect to one of the key metrics, nobody cared, right? It was just like irrelevant. So what I'm really interested to see is, do you think the world is shifting away from that kind of numbers game and more into a more human-centric world? Do you think that's where we're headed?
I think so, and I think the events of the past 4 or 5 months have definitely accelerated that. I mean, so everybody talks about, they want high performance teams, but if you just take that word, perform. What does perform? Perform is to act, right? And what's authentic about that? Well, not very much, right? It means you're acting a particular role. And for me, the whole drive right now, it's, for each individual person, understanding why they are going to come and be a part of your team, why they're going to contribute to your team, understanding the thing that they are amazing at. And everybody has one or two things that they are really, really brilliant at. And it's getting people doing those particular things, and the stuff where they're not skilled, we'll find other people to go and do those things. And I know it sounds simplistic, but that's kind of like the heart of it, is getting people in roles that they love doing. And I think one of the ways that I came across this was as part of my experience, I've sailed twice around the world, and the first time was on what was called the world's toughest yacht race. And my skipper back then, her logic very much fitted the old world mentality, as you called it, that she had this saying that a fast boat is a happy boat. Because she thought if our sailing boat was going fast, then everybody would be happy and we would go even faster. So there we were, we raced across the Atlantic from Southampton to Boston, and we won first place, and we were utterly numbers and metrics focused. And then we raced down to South America, and we were the first boat around Cape Horn, and we were flying along. But the whole thing was that we were just literally blinkered looking at the numbers. So if we've got, 20 knots of wind, and we're meant to be doing, for a particular wind angles, doing between 7.2 and 7.5 knots, all everybody is doing is just staring at the numbers, much like the Microsoft world you described and how I remember my early working world as well, all about the numbers. here's where it came unstuck, right? That's not sustainable for the long term, because you can't drive people relentlessly like that. And for us, that came unstuck in Wellington Harbour in New Zealand, when we ended up spectacularly crashing our boat, and we ended up getting disqualified from the race, and we had a new skipper, and we had to come back with a different methodology. And that was the point that I realized that actually it's not a fast team as a happy team, it's a happy team as a fast team. And that for me is about helping each individual on the team find work that they find fulfilling and make sure that they are happy, not just at work, but at home as well. And that's one of the other things that I rail against in the book as well. This whole mentality, we just like have work life and home life. No, you've got one life, right? And it's just looking at the whole person. So yeah, lots of things there, but that's kind of the philosophies behind it. So
no, I love it, and I wanted to come in there on the point about work life and home life, and actually to bring us. There's a conversation we had. There's a lovely guy called Tony Crabb, who has been on the show, and he does a number of things, and he talks about being busy, but when we talked about his sort of work in the context of coronavirus, sort of had a lovely sort of epiphany. This is the second time with Tony. I need to sort him out with some money or some drinks, I don't know, for that, but he was talking about sort of part of the challenge about being home is you have to expand the horizon of your sort of work priorities to include your family priorities, and you have to think of them together in unison, rather than what we would typically do as we go to the offices. I'm at the office now, so I'm going to park all of my home life stuff because I'm at the office and I'm going to think about. Well, he's saying you're to bring them together, and you have this concept of the family team model, which I really quite liked. So I wondered, could you sort of unpack your thinking around that a little bit for us?
So to give you a little bit more background how I came to that. So in 2009. My wife and I, we weren't getting on very well. That's probably the best way to put it. We weren't far away from getting divorced, and my business wasn't doing particularly well either, and doing 16, 18-hour days. And so that was the point when we said, we just need to have a fundamental reset and think about where we are going in life. And so we rewrote the story of our future. And so I did that with my family team first. And I never thought about my family as a team. But part of that rewrite is we said that my wife and three kids, by the time we ended up leaving, we were going to go and sail around the world for 2 years as a family team. So I then had to think about, how am I going to build a team with my wife who doesn't sail, and ultimately what will become 3 kids. So what I ended up doing was taking a lot of the ideas that I had to develop in my business in order to turn around my business from being a loss-making position to being, moderately successful. And so I took ideas from business and I applied them at home. And by converse, I took ideas from home and I was applying them in business. But the family team, that really started to take shape in terms of the fact that we had a family story, a vision of where we were going as a family team. It was there on the kitchen saying, this is what we're all about. We created a set of family values, and we used that as the backbone for a conversation around, what do we want to see more of? How do we encourage more of those types of behaviors? So, ultimately, we had 2 years as a family team going around the world. So we really did have to work together as a team to tackle, the world's toughest oceans. So, it's just, again, I have this belief that there's this fundamental set of tools, 20 principles in the book, and they apply equally well at work or at home. But generally, my experience, people don't think of them in that context as either one or the other, but it's a universal set of tools.
No, totally. And look, I know a lot of people, and I'm probably thinking a lot of people like me, wince at the thought of approaching your family life with the same kind of rigor as your work life when it comes to, and we've all seen, and the problem is we've all been polluted by those corporate values that are typically, stenciled in vinyl 6 feet high at the reception desk when you walk in. And that's the only time you ever see them, right? Because nobody else has bothered to read them or exhibits any of them, right? But actually it's this sort of what sits underneath this, which is the purpose. But actually values are crucially important in terms of gaining alignment. And again, it makes me think of Brennan Jacobi, who did a piece again on teamwork. We talked about it earlier on another show, and one of the show is this sort of concept of clarity, about being sort of communicating with everybody so that everybody has a shared sense, a shared understanding of what's going on and what you're trying to achieve, which I think You know, if I look back just in the last, you know, few months of my working at home in lockdown, the absolute best days is when I've done a really good job of signposting, you know, the work that I've got on, or if I've spent some time with my wife or son understanding the things that they're trying to do. And so that we all kind of sort of, we come together to figure out, well, what's the best way to do that? Or, you know, when do we able to engage with each other? So, I mean, I absolutely love that.
So just to pick up on that, actually, about and I get the horror about the people saying, you know, we can take this corporate stuff and put it at home. But here's the thing that I learned: the best way to do the corporate stuff is to take it from work and run it through the filter at home, because your family will give you the hard brutal truth about whether you're being a complete dick or whether it's being completely ridiculous. And then once you've like put that corporate stuff in like normal language, then it's ready to take back to the office. And then I promise you, you understand it in a corporate sense an awful lot better. So actually, a lot of the stuff around values, I learned that in the family context first, and then it made much more sense when I applied it at work. But yeah, taking that, I mean, yeah, we both worked at KPMG, taking the 10 values on the wall and taking that, my wife laughed at me. It's like, oh, that's not going to happen, is it? So so there's a filtering process about making it language applicable, but the principles underlying it, and you know, where are we going? How do we work together? How do we behave? How do we act? And that stuff is true.
But I mean, what I think is so you can take away the cynicism that I show. What I think sits underneath it is a shared sense of purpose, or at least a shared understanding of purpose too, because you might have different purposes in the things that you're doing, and certainly as a family you can imagine, you know, my son's probably got a different purpose in what he's trying to do in terms of what I'm trying to do, albeit just because we're at different stages in life. But that shared understanding, I think, is important. And it brings me to another sort of bit that I loved in the book, which is about the rule of three. And I know I'm just dropping you into this. And it happens to me when people talk about my book. And I mean, I wrote my book a long time ago. On page 234, you referenced something that Einstein. I'm like, I don't know. Jesus. You know, you sure it's my book? Anyway, you have this lovely thing about rule of three, which is about helping a team sort of navigate through the things that they're trying to achieve as a team. And the rule of three were about Polestar, gifts not arrows, and think of the hourglass. And actually I kind of love that as a concept of helping walk a team through how to sort of achieve things, to achieve the objective that's set out. I don't know if you feel like just setting out that rule of three in sort of more detail.
So it's funny. So the understanding piece and the purpose piece you just mentioned, that leads straight into the Polestar story. So what's the Polestar story? It's fundamentally where are we going? Family team, business team, same sort of thing. And how you get to that, the process of how you get to that story is actually more important than whatever the story is. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but the process of creating that Polestar story starts with asking open questions, and then listening some more. Because what underpins a team, what I've found, is that, you know, a team of people is simply a group of people who trust each other. And the best way to develop trust is by listening. And, you know, if I take the family context to start with, when my wife and we started to create our story of the future, I use my hands to illustrate. She told me everything that was important to her, and I represent that as this hand here. And I told her everything that was important to me. So I knew what was important to her. She knew what was important to me. We looked for the crossover where my thumbs are, and we ignored everything else. And we just focused on those common elements. And we said, okay, what's the story that we can create with that? And that was how we created our family story. Exactly the same process when I sat down with my senior team inside the business and said, what's the organization that we want to create that we can feel proud of? The old way I would have gone about it or certainly was, that's where we're going, a sort of dictatorial, ego-driven model. That's the answer. This is like a co-created thing. And for me, that's the first starting point. And that is so vital. And it sounds so simple, but if that part is missed out, you missed out the juice of the trust building, of the listening, of the engagement. Because once you've got that shared clarity, the other two bits are pretty easy. So that's by far and away the most important part of it.
Yeah, I love that. And I actually, the bit that I'd read but I'd missed when I wanted to talk to you about was the fact that you've just called out. It's the getting everybody to the same page that is the more important part than even just having the poll star itself. And it's funny, there's a regular contributor to the show called Gary, and he and I spent a long time doing that with various public sector clients. Our job, all our job was just to normalize that everybody's sense of the vision. So that's great. I love that. No, so look, that was the first part. So having that sort of shared purpose. Talk to me about gifts, not arrows, because again, I love that.
Okay, so the concept of gifts, not arrows, is when you put out your big bold goal, business or family, this is the things you're going to go and do. Then the first thing that happens is that you start to get all sorts of negative voices. They'll usually start inside your head, and then from lots of other people. So, for us, you can imagine that when we told our family and our friends that we're going to go and sail around the world for 2 years, and we didn't have the money, we didn't have a boat, and my wife couldn't sail, you can imagine there was quite a lot of feedback to say you were absolutely crazy. And the key thing is to listen to whatever people throw at you, because people didn't just say you're crazy. They'd say you're crazy because your wife can't sail. Okay, tick, we've got to go and get that done. You're crazy because you haven't got a boat, you haven't got the money. And literally all these different things that people were saying they couldn't do, we're just writing them down. And the same as the negative reasons coming up in our head. And that basically just became our to-do list. Okay, so there's all the different things there that we need to go and figure out the answers to. The challenge and why often people see them as arrows rather than gifts is they feel like criticism, that someone's having a go at you. And what happens when someone criticizes you? You usually push back and try and argue. Whereas actually, if you just think that people are giving you these things and these ideas to think about, take them away in the cold light of day, go say, is there truth in that? What research do I need to do in order to get comfortable with this? So, for example, one of the reasons why everyone said we shouldn't go and do our sailing trip was that, the risk of medical dangers. So we looked at that, and then we sort of we went through loads of different things to mitigate that risk. So my wife and I both trained to become ship's doctors. We had an insane amount of medical kit. We had a service where we had 24-hour access via satellite phone to a doctor. We always knew where there was a doctor going around the world. So unless we'd been really challenged hard on that, we might not have gone to the depths of thinking about it. So it's taking all that criticism, which the danger is you react and you start arguing back against. But you turn those things into the gifts, and that becomes your to-do list. So that's probably the second point. And then the third point, do you want to dive into a question? Or
yeah. Go straight to the third.
So the thing about the hourglass is if you have it like an hourglass or an egg timer you stick in front of you, one thing you'll observe about it, only one grain of sand can go through it at a time. And the danger is that you have your big challenge and you get overwhelmed. And it's like, well, okay, you can only do one thing at a time. So break it down. What's the single most important thing that I need to do? And work through it methodically, be super organized, and take your time, because the classic thing, how do you eat an elephant, right? It's in small bites, isn't it? So but a lot of that is about managing your emotions during that process, both during the listening process, during the process of the negative thoughts and the criticism, and then just sort of managing overwhelm in terms of the time to go and do that. But that's where having a team really helps, that it's not just you, there's other people and you can share the ideas. And I'm a great believer in vocalizing one's emotions. What are you feeling? And getting it out there, because that's the single best way I know to start neutralizing it. So.
And it's interesting you bring that, because that was another common theme throughout the sort of principles, with this sort of recognizing the difference between emotional and cognitive sort of responses as part of that. Do you think would you describe that sort of an underlying foundation that makes the 20 principles come to life? Or
I think it's that's a really good way of describing it. I mean, I know one of the other chapters we talk about recalibrating your compass, which is what's your identity, what's your story, which is some important personal work that you need to do. So there's a level of self-awareness that you need to have, and I was sort of have in front of my mind that most of all our thinking part comes from our cognitive brain, which is the last 30% of our brain to be developed, but the other 70%, our emotional brain at the back of our head, that's the one that always responds fast. Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, that's the one that comes up with the first answer, and this is the one that kicks in afterwards. So having a really good understanding of how we as humans operate, and in particular our own unique biases, for me that's a fundamental part of being more human, and what it takes to build teams. And you'll come across in the book the formula. We're all a work in progress. We've all got like a whole bunch of weaknesses at any one point in time, and the moment you think you've arrived, it's like, I promise you haven't. It's still going, right? So.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's been a lovely theme throughout all of this. And we talked about Tony Crabb earlier. That's a big part of his thing is this sort of, and growth mindset is wrapped up in all of this too. It's this sort of railing against perfection. As just something that is not worth obtaining. We all strive to be better, and I'm kicking myself because my dad's dad used to have a great phrase about that: strive for protection or wisdom. And he's going to phone me up the minute I get off this. He's going to phone me up and says, "You bloody idiot, it's this phrase." But sorry, Dad, I get the principle of it, but it is that sort of what can we do to make things better, but without sort of striving to make it purpose. Brilliant. So look, just conscious of time, there was one question that I'm desperate to ask you, which is, you wrote this book in January, and presumably you've been thinking about it a lot leading up to the moment at which you put pen to paper or finger to keyboard. But I suspect that the world that you were writing this book for is very different to the world that you ended up writing the book for. So given that coronavirus is a thing, I'm going to come back to coronavirus. Coronavirus aside, what is the world that you're attempting to fix with this? What is the problem that you want to fix? Where were the issues that you saw in the world that you were aiming this book at before coronavirus really sort of took over more of the context of it?
Yeah, no, that's an insightful question. I think the word that comes out for me is all about thriving, and it's about finding fulfillment. It's about finding purpose, not just in the work part of your life, but in all of your life. And that for me is the underlying theme which pulls all this together. And you're quite right. I started writing this before coronavirus, and as I reflected on all the different experiences that I had, and I saw that so much of the world was still operating in this finite mindset way, thinking about these win-lose finish lines, thinking about number-driven worlds, and it's like, what? I don't think that's the right way. I think there's a better way, and the coronavirus has just played into that it's just like accelerated everything that basically I think is important and is coming out of the book. So it feels like it was the right timing before. It's even more the right timing now, because it's they're questions that we can't avoid. And talking to working with lots of different companies, these are questions that people are facing about the merging of work life and home life, questioning purpose, questioning identity. These are all really big questions that are in the air at the moment. And hopefully the book provides a few tools and pointers in terms of how to think about that.
Well, look, I mean, I definitely think it does. I mean, I read it given the context of coronavirus. I mean, obviously, I sort of was thinking about it more deeply, but one of the things that we consistently have spoken about over the last 15 weeks is how being dispersed changes the nature of how we think about organizational culture, how we think about rewards and recognition, how we think about leadership and management, and how we think about productivity. And what I think the book offers a really helpful structure for is when you are in the position of thinking through these things, and the leaders that we're talking to increasingly are all thinking about not how do we navigate our way out of lockdown, but how do we set ourselves up for success in whatever the future is going to bring us. There are many of the questions that they're asking, I think the book helps provide answers with. And just sort of on that, if I look at time now, and just to bring things to a close, the bit that I loved, and given the context of what you've done in terms of sailing around the world and all that sort of stuff, I really love the whole concept of recalibrating your compass. And if I look at what organizations are doing, if I look at what leaders are doing right now, that's exactly what they need to be doing. So just, classic sort of interview question. the most important advice you could offer a leader about recalibrating their office? What's the thing that the most important thing they should be focusing on to get them set up for success for their future?
It's the most important thing is their internal story, their internal dialogue about where they're going. And the background to that is that when we made the choice to go and sail around the world, I had to shift my identity from being a CEO, an entrepreneur running a business, to now going and being someone who's going to be on a boat. And I had to rethink myself to someone who could create a business that could run without me. And boy, did that challenge my ego when I started to ask that question. But the answer comes from introspection and asking yourself what's truly important to you, and what's that internal story that you want to go and create. So it's crafting your own internal pole star. And then I talk in the book about some different techniques about once you've got that, how do you then embed that and really focus on that? Because for a lot of people, it's going to be a shift from where things are right now. And the piece we talked about, the cognitive versus the emotional, that it's one thing to think it, but it's another thing that you have to really embed it in your psychology. Otherwise, you'll just keep snapping back to where you were before. But it's creating a really clear story of who you are, your value in the world, what you're going to bring, what you're going to contribute. And that comes from introspection. So.
No, that's brilliant. And listen, on that note, Caspar, I'm going to start to wrap things up. So I just want to say thank you so much for spending your time with us, spending your Wednesday evening. It was really great to get your story and to get your insight. So thank you for joining us.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just cut you off there, Caspar. I didn't mean to do that too soon. So Caspar's book is called Be More Human. You will have to get the ordinary version with the green type. I have some green screen fun going on here. So you can get this now on Amazon. Really, really good read. Recommend you do so. I have to tell you, there is a studio fly buzzing around here, which is hilarious because last night, nerd friends, I watched the original Star Trek episode, The Wink of an Eye, if you'll remember, where James Kirk gets accelerated so fast in time, he appears invisible but talks like a fly. So maybe Jim Kirk is here with us right now. And on that bombshell, I'm going to ask you, you know the drill, we'd love to get your subscriptions. If I can get the button to work, the button's not going to play nice. Hit the subscribe button, there it is, finally it comes up, hit the like button, ring the bell, whatever you can. We'd love your support. It's great to have you with us for the journey. We will see you all again next week for another show. Thanks, guys.
There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioner's future. This is just one of them.